Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another edition of Talking Point. My name is Faraz Patel. We are coming to you live from our studios here in Johannesburg on Hilaal TV channel 347. I'll be in your company for the next 50 to 55 minutes. A couple of weeks ago, COSATU held their Congress and Ms. Zingiswa Losi, for a second term, was elected as the president of the organization. And she joins me now in studio. Ms. Losi, good evening and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Mr. Patel, and thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Second term as president, Ms. Losi. The question is obviously what would be different now to what you served into the first term, heading into the second term, and what are some of the, obviously, the resolutions that were taken from your previous term, which you take into your second term?
I must also just say that I am humbled by the fact that workers said they want me to continue in concluding the work that we have started in the last term, as you say. It is always an honor to be serving workers. Indeed, the first term was a term that had turbulences in terms of the economy. We lost about 3 years as a result of COVID, but in terms of the achievements that we have attained for workers in that period, I think we've managed to achieve things that would have taken us even longer, where we have seen, where we released about billions of rands to the UIF, 65 billions of rands from the UIF to the 5.5 million workers. Those were the interventions that we made during that period when we were dealing with COVID. Some of the resolutions that came from the previous Congress into this term of office are the issues of how we're going to ensure that we save jobs in our country, and also how we're going to resuscitate the state-owned entities, as we know that they have battled under different leadership of those that were given the responsibility to run them. And at most, they have contributed to the high levels of unemployment that we see, because some of them have retrenched workers. We're dealing with issues of the economy that has melted down. We're dealing with issues of the fourth industrial revolution that has also seen a number of jobs being lost in some sectors. But we're also looking into how we can make a contribution in ensuring that alternative jobs are created in new sectors. We're dealing with unions that have been weak, which has been a challenge in the past term, where COSATU has had to intervene in terms of its constitution. We amended our constitution in the 13th National Congress to ensure that COSATU makes a significant intervention in helping unions. And we have seen a dramatic change on that in terms of the unions that were really struggling. For an example, your Municipal Workers Union, SAMU, which has now become a union in good standing in the Federation and has managed to relaunch its structures, including having its National Congress. It is stable, but we have also now gone to make interventions in different unions. So the mandate of the last Congress to this Congress, in terms of building a strong federation, I think it is the key mandate, and also ensuring that strong unions then are able to make interventions in the sectors where they are organizing.
Ms. Losi, obviously, pre-COVID-19, obviously years before that, we saw the 2008-09 financial crisis. Obviously, didn't have a major jobs bloodbath that what we had now during COVID-19. Just how did COSATU go ahead and navigate during the COVID-19? Because we saw the devastation of it in the economy, but more how would I say, more devastating than that would have been obviously the loss of jobs, because the economy did contract. Certain sectors of the economy, of course, had to let go of workers. So how did COSATU obviously help the workers with regards to making sure that even though they were retrenched, the UIF, as you mentioned, was able to help them during those difficult times?
Indeed. Part of what I've raised earlier on was the 65 billion,
yes.
Which we tapped from the UIF, which was tax-free to workers, which assisted 5.5 million workers in South Africa. But also we went into as far as in speaking to government and the private sector on the 350 social relief distress grants, which moved beyond workers. It dealt with people that are unemployed, to alleviate the levels of poverty in our country, but also make sure that people are able to put food on the table. And when we went to COVID, we had just passed the national minimum wage, which also made a significant improvement into the wages of domestic workers and farm workers. We've seen 800,000 farm workers moving from 6 rands an hour to 23 rands 19 cents, and domestic workers, which are over about 900,000, moving from 16 rands an hour to 23 rand 19 cents. So we also spoke and negotiated at the level of NEDLEC and agreed on the sectoral master plans, where we have seen, particularly in the clothing and textile sector, and in some sectors where unions were part of those sectoral master plans, to ensure that there is job creation. We've seen also a huge improvement in terms of the wage negotiations that have taken place in that sector in particular, where we've seen workers being able to get above inflation increases during their negotiations that have taken place in the past years. So we have seen huge improvement, but we continue to work with different unions in different sectors, and also importantly at the level of NEDLEC, where we negotiate with government, business and civil society.
Ms. Losi, before we go to the break, you're telling me off air, you're also the president of the labor unions for the entire SADC region. We know that our democracy, even though there's challenges with regards to so many things that are happening to the country, the beauty of our democracy allows us to have unions to represent the workers. It may not be the case in some other African countries, Swaziland being one of them, given that it's a monarchy. From your engagement, of course, you said there's going to be a congress happening quite soon with regards to the SADC region. Talk to us about the challenges that other countries within the region face with regards to labor unions, and some may call it even the suppression of it.
Indeed, it is a huge challenge in some countries like Zimbabwe, in Swaziland, where you have workers being given their rights in terms of the conventions of the ILO, but then in terms of the laws in the country, a government uses a different law to suppress the workers' rights, for them to express the rights that they are given. So they are given on this other hand, and then they are taken using the suppression laws, using police and all of that. So from the SADC point of view, we have really, really serious challenges where some unions cannot necessarily express themselves, and which has led to a huge migration that have taken place in the region, but also beyond the region in the African continent, where workers and the working class are forced to migrate and come to South Africa as a result of the rights that we have that are enshrined excuse me, in our constitution and in the Labour Relations Act. So that is why COSATU has always been seen at the forefront of the international solidarity in the SADC, in the region, in the continent, and also globally, because we understand that part of what we have attained as a democracy in South Africa was a result of solidarity that was given to us by workers and people of these countries, that today their rights have been taken away. So it is a sad state of affairs, but we have a 11th Delegates Congress of SATUC, which is taking place in South Africa in Birchwood on the 25th to the 29th of October, where delegates in the SADC region will be meeting and really discussing the issues of migration, which is a serious issue that is confronting all of us in the African continent.
And it's interesting to see, because, as you mentioned, of course, we have a beautiful democracy, but it's not the same with regards to the rest of the SADC region. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting conference to see what goes ahead and happens there. But after the break, I will be continuing my conversation with the newly elected COSATU president for the second term, Ms. Zingiswa Losi. After the break, we discuss the challenges of the South African economy. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. I'm in conversation with COSATU President Ms. Zingiswa Losi. Ms. Losi, the challenges of the economy are there for all to see. Unemployment at a record high, youth unemployment. It's a sad state of affairs that we're seeing right now in the country. And, you know, obviously the notion that you sold as obviously a recent graduate is that you will get a job once you have any sort of qualification, but that's not always the case. How do we how do we tackle this? Because just to curb unemployment even by half of what we have right now is such a serious challenge.
It is a serious challenge. We're sitting at 44% of unemployment, 60% of young people unemployed. As you say, that graduates who will stay for about 10 years without really seeing employment. I think we need a political will. We have, at the level of NEDLAC, agreed on an economic reconstruction and recovery plan. We agreed on a job summit on jobs that must be created and the investment in the economy. We had investment, a summit in South Africa. We had the inaugural black industrialist that the president had launched in terms of its existence in our country. And I think the political will is what we need. We need to fight corruption. I think that's the first thing. Yes. Because it does not matter what we put in. If we really do not have systems that hinder and ensure that corruption have no place, if we don't have strong arms of the law in our country to tackle and prosecute, then we're going to continue to have people that are becoming richer and others continue to becoming poor. We need business to play its role in ensuring that they do not go on an investment strike that we have seen. Business came in and said, we are going to create, for an example, 10,000 jobs in the mining industry in the job summit. And months later, they came and said, we need to retrench 10,000 workers in the next 10 years. So you say this, but what you intend to do, you create a challenge, a crisis now, and then you say you're going to solve that crisis in the next 10 years. Now, we can never grow the economy when we continue with retrenchments. I think government is doing what it should be doing in terms of creating an environment for business to invest in South Africa. But the challenge that we have within that environment that government is not mastering is the issue of energy. And I think once we deal with the issues of energy in our country, the challenges that the state-owned entities are facing, particularly ESCOM, then we're going to have business confidence to come and invest, and then we'll be able to create opportunities of employment for South Africans and people outside our country. So COSATU came with an ESCOM social compact, which we made a proposal at the level of NEDLAC. It was agreed to. What we need to see is the implementation of that. Part of the package in the ESCOM Social Compact is to ensure that you have systems in place that are going to have accountability, because at times that's what we lack in South Africa, that you have people that are put to power in different sectors of our economy, in different institutions, but it seems as if no one is held to account. But workers at the end of the day have to bear the brunt of facing the consequences of poor management. So we need to deal with issues of energy in our country. We need to ensure that business deals with corruption in their own sector. And I'm happy when I saw an article yesterday about the South African Revenue Services dealing with the issue of
sign-off, yes,
the Josta issue, where his assets are going to be taken, and these are the actions that we want to see. It's been 5 years since the Steinhoff saga, and but we're only seeing the outcomes and the results 5 years later, when workers have lost their pensions, when workers have lost jobs, and I think once we have business and government really having that political will to implement the decisions that we have agreed to, opportunities are going to thrive. And the notion also of business, of saying we need to firstly grow the economy, which is correct, in order for us to create jobs. But then we sometimes find contradictions in that, because you are not going to grow the economy if people are unemployed. So we have to ensure that government plays its role in creating an environment for business to invest, which government to some extent, as I've said earlier on, has done. We have tax rebates that businesses in South Africa have benefited on, with the notion that, and understanding that when they get tax rebates, they're going to create employment, which is not what they did. Instead, they went on not creating those jobs that they said they were going to create. That is why I was saying, when we sit at NEDLAC and we agree on an economic reconstruction and recovery plan, and we agree on the ESCOM social compact, we agree on the environment which all of us are going to play our role, we need to stick to what we have agreed to, so that South Africa can be able to become a country that we have all envisaged to have, and that we are able to say to our kids that when you go to university, it is not the end of it. When you come out of university, if you are not employed, you're going to become an entrepreneur. And I think the curriculum also that we have in our schools need to be a curriculum of an economy that we want to see. We can't continue to create graduates that are not going to have jobs. We need to understand what is it that the economy needs, and then ensure that the education system is the education system that speaks to the future of our economy.
Ms. Losi, we are going to touch on SOEs in the next section. You know the famous saying, it takes two to tango.
Yes.
President Ramaphosa earlier this year said that it's not solely government's job to create jobs, that the private sector needs to come to the party. I get that. But if you are the government, surely there has to be a will from them to create jobs, because if you're not going ahead and making that will to happen, then you're not going to see a curbing of the unemployment rate.
The government creates an environment. Where government then creates jobs is in the public sector, as we know. So for the private sector, they need to create an environment. Hence, we say key to that is to ensure that we sort the ESCOM issue, the issues of energy, but we also sort the state-owned entities. We just had a strike of Transnet.
Yes.
The rail infrastructure in this country is pouring. And business, for it to also ensure that the goods that they produce are able to reach the destination, you need to sort out the issues of rail infrastructure. We need to deal with the infrastructure. We need to deal with roads in our country. You need to ensure that state-owned entities are playing their role in a developmental state. And then government, in terms of the public sector, for an example, the population continues to grow, but the public servants, the jobs that, the vacant posts that exist are not filled. You have a ratio that is not equal, where you have a growing population and then you have a police ratio to that population that is decreasing. The nurses in our country, the doctors. So government needs to ensure that they fill the vacant funded posts that exist in the public sector. And then in the state-owned entities, we don't need to privatize. We need to find correct people that are going to ensure that they run the state-owned entities such that they are able to provide their mandate in creation of jobs, but also in providing services to the poor. Because the mistake that we will make is to think that in order for us to grow the economy, we need to privatize everything,
Yes.
which becomes a challenge to those that are unemployed, because it means the cost of living is going to be becoming too high, because there's no business that does any business out of charity. They need to ensure that they have profits at the end of the day. So if you're going to privatize state-owned entities, it means services to people are going to become a challenge. But we need to put the right people. We need to also professionalize the state,
Yes.
so that the plans that we have are plans that go beyond an electoral term, that any government that comes in place through an election is a government that understands that the state is a state that is ready to run irrespective of who the government is, so that the plans do not continue to change. Because what we have seen at times that hindered the growth in our economy is that every government that comes in different terms, it may be of one political party, but different leaders of the same political party comes with different plans. And you have the state machinery that does not know what to do now, because we have dropped what we were doing and now we need to accustomize ourselves to a different plan, and we end up as a country not knowing exactly where are we going to. If we were to be asked as South Africans, what is the vision that we have for this country, I doubt if we will have the same answer to that question.
In 1 minute, just before we go to the break, Ms. Losi, capitalism, the system of capitalism, how much does it hinder work of unions, knowing that when you sit down in the bargaining council, is it a fair assessment to say that unions are always on the back foot when dealing with your CEOs or board of directors?
Oh yes, oh yes, and I agree with that sentiment, because we have seen the Sibanye steel workers strike, where workers were merely demanding a 1,000 rand increase. And in the midst of that, when the difference was about 100 rand, and workers were allowed to go on strike for months, and the CEO got to be paid millions of rands. Yes. And then we saw it at Pick n Pay, where the CEO got to be paid over 3 million rands as a bonus, when workers cannot get a living wage. A worker at Pick n Pay had to resign because at the end of the month, that worker was taking home allegedly 2,500. And the cost just of going to work for the month was 3,500. And you have those huge differences. And yet the reason for a bonus, it is said that it is because you are the best performing CEO, meaning the work that the workers are doing has put you to earn the bonus that you are receiving. But the share is not equal to the workers and the CEOs. And I think in capitalism, workers have always been at the receiving end for the West.
Well, after the break, we are going to be touching on the state of the SOEs here in South Africa, especially what is currently happening in Eskom, as we're still battling the dreaded word, which is none other than load shedding. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. I'm in conversation with COSATU President, Ms. Zingiswa Losi. Ms. Losi, SOEs, it's fair to say that they are a far cry from what it has to be, and that's, of course, being in a glorious moment. One of them, of course, being Eskom. How do we deal with this challenge? I know you said, obviously, there was a compact plan that COSATU was involved in, but the buck stops with the leadership, doesn't it? And I mean, a couple of weeks ago, we had Eskom CEO Andre de Ruyter saying that we couldn't even go to stage 15. And that would mean, obviously, us being in what can only be termed a apocalyptic, supposed time for us here, where there would be no energy. How do we deal with the energy crisis? Because load shedding is not disappearing anytime soon. But there has to be a way. I know there's obviously signings of the IPPs and renewable energies, but that's not going to happen as in tomorrow.
I think we need to know what is wrong with Eskom. You know, maybe it's strangely for me as a person that I had to take notice that there is, it may be a coincidence, I don't know, that every time the president leaves the country, we move for each day that is out of the country to the next stage, to the next level of load shedding, which causes the president to come back. What changes when the president comes back, and then by him being in the country, then we are moving down to level 2, when we were at stage level 4 or 5.
It's like a knee-jerk reaction.
So what is wrong? Exactly what is wrong with Eskom? And there's a video which circulated of coal trucks leaving South Africa, going to Mozambique. And we have Eskom saying, we don't have the right coal, we have wet coal, and we have loads of truck that stays for days on the road, waiting to cross the border. So do we really have an energy crisis in South Africa, or it is created? We're a country that is also feeding other countries in the SADC, which those countries do not have challenges. So why are we having issues? Is it corruption that is embedded in the state-owned entities, particularly in Eskom? Who is held to account? Because I think we lack accountability, monitoring and accountability in Eskom. Do we have correct systems in place? So if this is where we are operating and we have a challenge, whoever that is supposed to be manning that section, whoever that is a supervisor in that area, whoever is a manager in that area, do we have people being accountable on what went wrong? Secondly, I know we have a challenge of izinyoka, illegal connections, which is also taking out, and you can't account for that because it means it's a waste energy that you are unable to account in terms of rands and cents. Do we have an entity that is able to feed into the growing population in our country? When we build houses, do we have a clear plan that when we build these houses, where are we going to connect them? And therefore, we need a substation closer to where we're building a new houses, for an example, or something that fits into that. Do we really have a clear plan even of moving to the IPPs? So COSATU came with an Eskom social compact that we do not understand. It answers some of these questions, and we don't understand why we are not moving to implementing it. And we think if we are to pay attention to these issues and have people's systems in place, because we seem to be a country that does not like to have systems in place. Your systems in place keep you in check. And we want to be reactionary in things that we do. We built Mudupi, we built Kusile, and we seem to be building things as if we don't have plans. Look at what we did with Transnet. Yes. We had trains that do not fit the rail, or the rail that does not. So exactly what was the plan? What is it that we wanted to have? We have said in the Eskom Social Compact that we need Eskom to be part of the renewables. So, because you cannot have Eskom relying on what the renewables are feeding. We have a government that has land in its disposal, where government can easily have its solar farm and feed into the grid without necessarily relying on the IPPs solely. And IPPs are not going to generate enough electricity. Have we really moved and said, for the bigger sectors of our economy that they are using a lot of energy, can they generate their own energy? Yes. So that you put a bit of relief from the grid in terms of energy consumption, and you can have households that are able to generate their own electricity. But we need a plan. We seem to be moving without clear plans. If we have one plan, does not talk to another. We have this department. I think that's another challenge. We have a Department of Minerals and Energy, and then SOEs are not part of that. Eskom is not part of that. Eskom is part of the public enterprises. So when this minister sits down and plan its department and how he's going to execute, does this plan talk to this one? Do we have a cabinet plan that is very clear that if we want to build houses, for an example, what is the plan in terms of the road infrastructure? What is the plan in terms of a human settlement, or in terms of water and sanitation, energy? And you are able to see the entire town and how everything is going to fit into, and how you're going to have, for an example, as Chinese would build their new towns and new cities, that you can't build this one, you can't have a settlement without having a hospital, without having a clinic, without having a mall. So you have an economy already that you know by the time you're finished, you're going to be able to create so much jobs, you're going to have schools, and this is the plan where kids are going to be moving and people evolving in terms of their lives. We seem not to have such a plan when we plan our country. Each department reacts, and I think part of the challenges that we have in dealing with energy crisis is to deal with the department of the SOEs. Either it does not exist or it is merged under the minerals and energy, the part that speaks to it. And then where you have transport and road and infrastructure, then you have your SAA, your airports, your Transnet falling into that. Otherwise, the way we are planning things, I think this is where we have leakages and we have nothing that connects together. And we have a lot of money in this country, but I think it is the lack of planning and execution that makes us to be leaking that, which gives an opportunity for people to become corrupt. Because what you have should be enough. But because of the leakages that exist and the lack of connectivity in terms of how we plan, lack of systems enables people to see opportunities, and we have duplications of things when we can align in terms of how we plan. So I think the energy crisis is going to be about how we plan. Do we have systems in place? Do we have people that are accountable? In the private sector, where I come from, even in the production line, Mr. Patel, you account for why you could not produce the units within the time that allocated, because time is money.
Yes, of course.
In the SOEs, do we have that? Do we have managers that are able to account every morning on what happened in the previous shift?
Yes.
And you are able to do that in the private sector because we have systems in place and you have accountability, and there are consequences for lack of management. In the public sector and in the SOEs, we seem to be in our uncles' houses, and it's free for all, and which is what we keep on moving into the same place without any progress. And those that are suffering are the ordinary South Africans.
Before we go to the break, Ms. Losi, you mentioned the roles of the certain departments and ministries. I take Transnet, and of course, falls under Public Enterprises and Department of Transport, SABC, Communications Ministry and or Department and Public Enterprises, and the same goes for Denel, same goes for PRASA. It seems that their own government only reacts when there's a need for bailouts, but there's no plan besides bailouts. Is that something that us as citizens should be concerned of? Because at the end of the day, it's our taxpayer.
Yes.
It's the taxpayer's money. It's our money that is paying for this bailouts, but there seems to be no clear plan.
Correct. We can't afford to continue to be bailing out with no consequences. Yes. We need to know, what are we bailing out? Denel. We have an opportunity. We have said it years ago as COSATU, and we said, why are we not building a South African vehicle, South African car? Yes. Why are you not manufacturing? Because Denel can do that. And we can repurpose these SOEs. And until we know what is it that we need to do, because if we hand it over to the private sector, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to repurpose it. And they're going to then, of course, run them efficiently because there's accountability. And if, without privatizing them, have people that understand how to run business with no political interference, clear mandate of the state-owned entities. When managers are not performing in terms of what they have contracted to, you fire them. And you have people that know what they need to do. And until we have that, until we remove political interference in the state-owned entities, taxpayers are going to continue to bail them out. With Eskom Social Compact, we're very clear in terms of our plan, how we can move Eskom out of being bailed out. And we said we can use the PIC, for an example. Already we've invested money as workers there. And we're saying then you can use that and give workers a share to own part of what they have already invested.
Yes.
Of course, business is a bit against that.
Yes.
Government does not want to play its part. And then you would continue to say, but we're unable to move with Eskom energy. You must understand, we need a bailout. We need a bailout. Until we get a situation of standoff where billions of rands of workers' pension funds get lost.
Yes.
Because we can't continue to borrow when we have enough money, but what we do not know is how to use that money profitably. And if we lack that, we have universities in our country that people graduate from and they have experience. And I can tell you, we have energy experts. We don't need people outside South Africa to tell us how to run that. We have financial experts in our country. We have people that can advise these SOEs on how to remain profitable, but at the same time not lose their own purpose, so that we don't have to continue to bail them out.
Losi, I wish we could have more time for this section, but after the break, we have to talk about the Tripartite Alliance and its future going forward. So do stay tuned. After the break, we will wrap up the conversation with COSATU President Ms. Zingiswa. Losi, do stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. I'm in conversation with COSATU President Ms. Zingiswa Losi. Ms. Losi, two events that happened this year. May Day rally at the Royal Bafokeng Sports Palace. And then, of course, during the National Congress, the recently concluded National Congress. On both occasions, two senior figures of the ANC, President Cyril Ramaphosa, was put off the stage. The chairperson of the ANC, Kwere Mantashe, was put off the stage. Both occasions, it came from the workers. You're on the ground with the workers. You represent them as the president. When looking at that, do the workers have every right to voice their concern against the ruling party?
Indeed, they do. Remember, COSATU is an alliance with the ANC, but we are independent organization. We derive our mandate from our constituency, which is the workers. And when workers have sent us into an alliance and say, speak on our behalf on these issues, and we raise those issues. And when we don't win, we raise them in the political alliance meetings. We raise them at the level of government, in NEDLEC. We then apply Section 77. We go on the streets. We are with workers. We voice our issues. We get no responses. You must expect workers to then, on their own, without their leaders, to voice how they feel. So what happened in Royal Bafokeng and what happened in the COSATU Congress was a demonstration of workers' anger about the conditions that they are faced. Look at the public sector wage agreement, Resolution 1 of 2018, which was agreed to, signed for 3 years. Concessions were made. Public sector workers would have a 1-year agreement, which you would then come back on another year. In 2018, they were made to sign a 3-year wage agreement, moving away from how they would want to have a term. Concessions were made, not that everyone was happy. An agreement was signed. You pay 2018, you pay 2019. When you must pay 2020, you then say as a government and as an employer, we can't pay because we don't think this wage agreement is valid. Why would you have paid the first 2 years? And then you go to court for this one, and the court says, indeed, you shouldn't be paying for different reasons. So workers are still expecting what was due to them because that was a signed agreement. And then you come back later on after you have reneged from this wage agreement. And then you say, Treasury says, in the next 4 years, we're going to implement a wage freeze in the public sector. Treasury is not negotiating.
It's a demand from their side, yeah.
Yes. So before workers even go for the next wage round of negotiations at the PSCPC, you are already making a pronouncement through Treasury that you are not going to get anything in the next round of negotiations for the next 4 years. It's a predetermined outcome. And when workers are negotiating, we have all of this. Now you have an outstanding agreement that was not paid. Now you have a dragging wage negotiations where already an employer has indicated that you are not going to settle for any wage increase. And you expect workers to celebrate when they see leaders that represent government coming to address them. Yes, we invited the ANC at Royal Bafokeng. We invited the ANC at the COSATU National Congress. But things did not stand still between the time when we were preparing for a May Day and between then and the time that we're having a Congress. Government, which is a government of the ANC, led by the president, with the ministers, his cabinet, continue to implement decisions that are anti-workers. And workers then cannot pretend to be happy about their conditions of work. And they express it in the manner that they choose to. So, is it a reflection on the state of the alliance? The Congress did not say that we must move away from the alliance. The Congress continued to say that we want a reconfigured alliance. But workers are saying we want, as members of the alliance, as partners of in this alliance relations, we want to be respected.
But will they get that respect? The reason why I asked that, Ms. Losi, is that is the ANC heeding to the call of the workers? Because I heard the interviews, especially with Mr. Mantashe, and it seems like a nonchalant sort of response. But these workers are voters also, and 2024 is not so far away. Is the ANC, as your alliance partner, heeding to what they're saying? Because if they're not heeding to what they're saying, the ANC may just go ahead and lose 2024. It's a reality.
It is. We want the ANC when we were going towards the local government elections. And we said, remember, it was at the point when the 2018 wage agreement was not implemented, the last leg. And we said, workers are angry. And you expect the very same workers to go and campaign and say, vote for the ANC. You expect them and their families to vote for the ANC. The outcomes of the local government elections, part of that is the anger from workers. We still said to the ANC, now we're moving to the 2024 general elections. How it's going to pan out, it depends on how you treat workers. Now, it is upon the ANC on what they do. Because what we have learned as workers in the local government outcomes is that it does not matter who is in government. Workers' role will not diminish. We have some municipal workers, which is a union affiliated to COSATU, where when the ANC was still in power in some municipalities, actually dismissed workers in some municipalities, and we thought it was political influence. And we agreed at the level of an alliance that those workers must be reinstated because the way they were dismissed was not the right way. The ANC in some municipalities did not adhere to that call. They lost those municipalities. Opposition parties in those municipalities reinstated those workers because some continued to understand its role as a trade union in the municipality, irrespective who is in charge. And that is why we always say that the role of COSATU, it does not matter who is in charge. COSATU existed pre-1994. COSATU exists post-1994. And COSATU and its affiliates will continue to exist irrespective who is in power. For the ANC to remain in power, the ANC must understand two things. That even if you were to take the branches of the ANC beyond the Nazareth conference that is coming, go to the 2024 elections, the number of membership of the ANC will not put the ANC into power. You need more than that. You need more than COSATU members to put you in power, combined with the ANC members. So it means the ANC, over and above the voice of workers, they need to adhere to the needs of the people in South Africa. They need to understand that the plight of the people in South Africa cannot continue to be the way they are, whilst the lives of those that are in cabinet and politicians, the gap continues to widen. They need to understand the reasons why ANC exists and go back to that. We're happy that, for an example, now the president is reconsidering the issue of the ministers' packs, because it was spitting in the face of the poorest of the poor in our country. So we don't need people to start being angry. You need to understand the kind of people that you are leading, that you are not leading only the cabinet. You are not leading only those that are in parliament. You are leading those that will put you in power, which are the ordinary voters. So whether the ANC would have 50+1, it is about what the ANC does now towards 2024. The time is now. When the ANC goes to its elective conference now in December, it is the kind of posture and behavior that the ANC cadres are going to take going to that Congress. And out of that, are we going to see a united African National Congress that is ready to govern South Africa? Are we going to see people of leaders of the ANC really, not because we're going to elections, but because every day they are with the people and they understand the plight of the people?
Ms. Losi, one final question. The South African Communist Party, which is of course part of the Tripartite Alliance, said that there's a possibility they may form their own political party. We don't know whether it's lip service or whether that's going to happen. I put it to you this way here. Does COSATU potentially have the same view as the SACP? And what does that mean for the future of the Tripartite Alliance?
The SACP is a political party. The SACP...
No, but I mean breaking away from the Tripartite Alliance.
The SACP does not necessarily have to break away from the Tripartite Alliance for it to contest elections. Remember, in the local government sphere, it did contest some of the wards. And the party needs to take that decision so that workers have an alternative. And these are the discussions that COSATU had in our last Congress, in the 14th Congress, which were coming from the 13th National Congress. That when we are not happy with the ANC, what is the alternative? Instead of staying at home and not voting, we need to vote for the alternative. Currently, what we see in the local government is the coalitions, which do not work. You can never have any government that is formed out of coalitions, because it is no longer about any manifesto that must be implemented, and there is no political party that is held to account, because no political party was given power to govern. Now, if the ANC, if the SACP remains in the alliance and contests state power, it gives an alternative for those that may not be happy with what the ANC is doing. And any coalition that the ANC will need and that a government can be formed can be a government of the alliance, where the ANC and the SACP can form a coalition government with the same ideology and on how we're going to move forward. That is why we call for a reconfigured alliance. That is why COSATU says it is time for the party to contest state power. It is not necessarily to contest the ANC. It is for the party to contest state power as a political party and as an alternative, because the ANC says the shortest route to socialism is through the National Democratic Revolution, and which the ANC is what it is going to take us through to socialism. And the party is waiting to take us to socialism. So you can have both working together to take us to that socialism that we want to see. But we need to have firm leaders of the SACP understanding the kind of a government that they are going to take us to. Whether that is going to be a coalition of the ANC and the Communist Party, that is why we need a reconfigured alliance so that we understand what we mean when we say the shortest route to socialism is through the National Democratic Revolution. That must be put in place and be executed when the party contests elections. It is not going to happen on its own for as long as leaders of the party continue to rely on the ANC for them to be in government.
Ms. Zingiswa, Losi, I wish we had more time to talk about so many other stuff. We'd like to say thank you. Congratulations on being elected for your second term. And may you, of course, COSATU as a union continue to help the plight of the workers, especially now, given that our unemployment rate is so high and the poorest of the poor continue to suffer, given so many circumstances that are happening right now in the country. We say thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Mr. Patel.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. There we are. That's the end of A Talking Point. In this episode, we hosted COSATU President Ms. Zingiswa Losi, who has just started second term as its president. For myself, Faraz Patel, and the rest of the production team, we'll see you again same time, same place next week. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.